My 32F father, 60s, has been married to Sasha, fake name, 40s, for almost a decade. I was already an adult when they started seeing each other, so I never had much of a relationship with her. That said, Sasha was nice and thoughtful, though a bit annoying at times, and I never had any problems with her. I now have a husband, 34M, and 2 kids, 9M and 4F. Sasha is very fond of my children, especially my daughter. That became very suffocating pretty quickly, so we started setting some boundaries. She never overstepped them. In January, my father and Sasha decided to go on a trip to Disney World, and invited us to join them. We decided to go to celebrate our son's 9th birthday. I quickly regretted coming along. Sasha spent the entire trip fussing over my daughter in ways that overstepped almost every boundary we'd set. Examples include, there were more instances. The final straw for me, however, was the last park day of the trip. We were at Magic Kingdom. My husband suffered a minor injury and I had to take him to the first aid station. The kids wanted to go to the Peter Pan ride, so my dad and Sasha offered to take them in the meantime. However, according to my father, the line was too long. So instead, Sasha suggested the Little Mermaid ride, assuring my kids Ursula wasn't on it. Actually, there's a pretty big Ursula animatronic there. My daughter was still sobbing and hugging her brother when we reunited. When we flew back home, I told my father that we'd no longer take our children on trips with Sasha due to her behavior. He got extremely angry. He said his wife loved my kids, thought about what they'd like to do at every moment of the trip, and that we should be grateful to have her in our lives. I lost my temper at that. I told him Sasha was a fucking creep, and that they should be grateful I was still okay with even seeing my children after her actions during the trip. We ended up having a huge fight after that. It's been weeks since we returned home, and my father is still angry at me and my husband. Sasha has texted me a few times. She says she's sorry if she made me uncomfortable, but that she loves my kids and hoped to use the trip to spend more time with them. To be honest, I don't think I'm the here. But I do think I might have overreacted. I believe there's a chance Sasha's actions were motivated by love and she truly did have good intentions. Ida? Update 1. As much as Sasha's behavior towards my children angered me and freaked me out, calling her a creep was the wrong reaction to have. That said, I think it's best for my family to distance itself from Sasha for the time being. And at the very least, my previous decision to avoid future trips with her based on the Disney trip is still the best course of action. Sasha's pushiness, tendency to override my and my husband's parenting and blatant favoritism towards my daughter were much worse when the kids were younger. After my daughter's birth, she began to focus too much attention on her and almost none on my son. I gave more examples of that in the comments on my original post. That's the reason we set boundaries in the first place. The way she fusses over my daughter also bothers me. When we had the boundary conversation with my father and Sasha, she told us that she'd always wondered what having a daughter would be like. She'd also defined herself as child-free before, so I was never certain what to think of that. Either way, that reassured me and my husband that we were doing the best for our kids. Those boundaries had never overstepped. Then we went on the Disney trip, and most of them were completely ignored. Many of you pointed out that she might have gotten carried away, or that Disney is exciting and she wanted to make sure my kids had the best experience, etc. There are 2 things I'll say to that. The first is that whatever Sasha's reasons were, she still overstepped our boundaries. When we first set those, we told her that doing so would have consequences. Disney or not, I don't see a reason to make an exception. Secondly, she wasn't trying to ensure my kids had the best experience. She was pushing them to fulfill her fantasy of what their Disney trip should look like. She repeatedly ignored my children's wishes in favor of her own, despite them both being very clear about what they wanted and didn't want. Sasha also continually favored my daughter, including during my son's birthday, and fussed over her in ways that made her uncomfortable. And I still haven't forgiven the Little Mermaid thing. My daughter is a bit shy and takes a while to open up to most people, so knowing her trust was broken like that angers me in ways I can't describe. To put it in simpler terms, my children aren't props. And whoever treats them as such will, at the very least, be put in time out. I called my father and Sasha on Saturday. I apologized for calling Sasha a creep, but told them that we needed some time apart. They won't see my family until my younger sister's birthday in late April. If that goes well, they'll be invited to my daughter's 5th birthday party in May. After that, we'll slowly work on re-establishing contact. I also said that if they overstepped our boundaries again, the consequences would be more dire. My father didn't take it well. I don't care. Sasha sent me a text with more apologies, followed by a request to at least FaceTime my kids every now and then. I said no. And to those who said my controlling behavior ruined the trip, my kids had an amazing time at Disney World. They're both still talking about it. My daughter keeps asking us to put her pictures with the characters she met up on the wall, and my son says he had the best birthday ever. Update 2. Last time I posted here, I mentioned that my father and Sasha wouldn't see my children until my younger sister's birthday. The party took place last weekend, and we didn't attend. These 2 months of NC worked fine, but not great. My father respected my wishes, to my surprise, but Sasha kept trying to find ways to talk to my children. She'd call me under the guise of needing to ask me something, only to later say, "By the way, are the kids around? I want to say hi." Every time she tried that, I'd remind her of what I'd told her back in March. This must have happened almost a dozen times, which was enough for my husband and I to start debating on skipping the party. After speaking to our kids, we decided not to go. They both said they missed my father, but clearly didn't want to see Sasha. We thought about attending and just distancing them from her while there, but risking making our children uncomfortable wasn't worth it. My son even asked if we could see their aunt somewhere else, without Sasha around. My husband and I explained the situation to my sister. She was upset, but mostly because she hadn't seen the kids in a while. We all went to dinner at her favorite restaurant the day after her party. I also called my father and told him we wouldn't go to the birthday party. He reacted better than I expected, but we still had a short fight about it. He claimed that I had promised we'd let Sasha see the kids after 2 months, called me unfair and said he was entitled to have a relationship with his grandchildren. I immediately denied that. Though I tried to sugarcoat it at first, I eventually gave him the truth. My kids don't want to see his wife, and I won't force them to. My father and I had a long talk. I told him how much Sasha's actions at the Disney trip upset my children, as well as how uncomfortable me and my husband felt. I admitted I don't trust his wife at all, and I don't think I ever truly will. He said that while he still thought I was overreacting, he understood I wanted to protect my kids. My dad also told me about how these 2 months of NC were for them. Apparently, Sasha started talking about my kids, mostly my daughter, a lot more than usual. She'd mention things and places she thought they would like. My father was aware of one of the times she called me, but thought it was a one-time thing. She wanted to give my daughter a gift at my sister's birthday party. He said he didn't know why. At one point, she told him she wanted to plan another family vacation with the kids, even though I told them they're not traveling with Sasha anymore. Learning all of that just made me more certain that I can't trust this woman around my children. For now, I intend to remain LC with my father and NC with Sasha. My daughter told me she wanted her grandpa at her birthday party a few weeks from now, so I told him that he was invited, but Sasha wasn't. He agreed. To be honest, I don't trust my father after all of this. I'm allowing him to come because that party will take place at my home, which is easier for me to control. If he tries to bring Sasha, they'll both be kicked out, and it will take a long time for me to consider letting him near my kids again. My father hasn't told me how his wife is reacting to this. My sister told me that during her party, Sasha asked her to tell me she wanted to talk. I'm not reaching out to her, nor do I plan to respond if she attempts to contact me. Both me and my husband have blocked her. My children are doing great. They still talk about how much fun they had at Disney. My daughter's been saving money, putting coins in her piggy bank, for us to go back. On a completely different note, I'm pregnant again. This was completely unplanned. I always said I wanted 2 kids at most, and the third would have to be a huge accident, but my husband and I are ecstatic. I'm still in the first trimester, so not a lot of people know. We're brainstorming ways to tell our kids. Overall, I'm happy with my life right now. And as much as I wish this Sasha situation had never happened, I feel a better parent after dealing with it. I have never been more confident in my abilities to protect my children than I am now. I don't think I'll update again anytime soon. Once again, thank you for all the support you've given me. I wish you the best. As much as I appreciate your insight, allow me to explain why I won't change my mind on this subject. First of all, I'm not concerned about avoiding too many events. My paternal family is smaller than my maternal side, and there aren't many get-togethers in the first place. The only reason my dad even went to my sister's birthday party was because she wanted to introduce her boyfriend to him. My father has also seen my children without Sasha countless times before, so that's not a concern either. I don't dislike Sasha. Even if I did, I've always been very careful not to let my opinions on others affect my children, specifically because I aim to teach them to be polite. But my kids are allowed to express themselves. If they don't like person X, they don't have to be around person X. It doesn't matter how much person X wants to see them. I'm not teaching them to sacrifice their comfort for someone who doesn't actually care about them. And no, Sasha doesn't actually care about my children, nor has she tried to build a relationship with them. Instead, she tries to push them, especially my daughter, to do what she wants to see them doing. Almost none of her actions during the Disney trip were for my daughter's benefit, they were for hers. Sasha is not my children's grandmother. They don't see her as such, she doesn't want to be seen as such, she calls herself aunt. Her actions weren't doting, nor did they have anything to do with her not being able to formulate relationships with children. She doesn't care about my daughter's happiness, she just treats her like a doll. My son, meanwhile, is cast aside. If someone overwhelms one of my children and ignores the other, on his birthday, they don't need to be around my kids. To answer the other part of your question, I have spoken with Sasha. It was the whole point of the boundary conversation. I communicated what was wrong, and what she could do to improve. Whenever I try to set boundaries, Sasha disrespects them. She does not listen to me. It's not my job to teach her how to build a relationship with my kids any more than I already have. That's the point of this NC policy. Sasha doesn't listen to me or my children. If my kids didn't mind, I'd consider other ways of approaching this. But they do mind, and I refuse to force them to be around someone who disrespects them. And the fact that she refuses to listen to my children and insists on pushing her fantasies onto my daughter is enough for me to go NC. Update 3. First of all, my father didn't bring Sasha to my daughter's birthday party back in May. I didn't really think he would. I'd made it very clear I wouldn't tolerate that, but I'd be lying if I said your comments didn't make me a little paranoid. Secondly, I've just entered my 3rd trimester, and the baby will be here in November. The kids are ecstatic. I'm having another girl, but my husband and I are not sharing the sex until she's born. This has nothing to do with our families, it's just something we've also done with our first 2. Everyone, including Sasha, knows I'm pregnant. We announced it a couple months ago. I had no problem with my father telling her, though he did ask if he could. I didn't hear much about her reaction, but according to my father, she was happy for me. My children still don't want to see Sasha, and I'm still not forcing them to. I've unblocked her and put her on mute instead, but she hasn't made any attempts to contact me. We've continued meeting my father without his wife, and I think it's been working out. My relationship with him isn't fantastic, but it's much better than it was earlier this year. Last week, I saw Sasha for the first time in months. My cousin threw a party at her place. My husband and I attended, as did my father and Sasha. I knew she'd be there, but since the kids weren't with us, son had a sleepover, daughter stayed with my mom, I didn't really have anything against seeing her. They arrived some time after we did. My husband and I spoke with them for a few minutes, and it was less awkward than I expected. Sasha asked me about the baby's sex, and I told her we weren't telling anyone, which, again, is what we've always done. About 20 minutes later, my father told me they had to go. I thought it was weird that they were leaving so soon, but I didn't think much of it at the time. He called me a few days ago, and we spoke for a long time. My father is difficult to talk to, so the following is what I gathered from the conversation. He said they left early because Sasha was holding back tears after she saw me. She was sobbing by the time they got to the car. They later had a discussion about it, and Sasha admitted she wanted kids. She married my dad knowing he didn't, but hoped he would change his mind. Apparently, when my son was born, Sasha tried to drop "I want one" hints to my father. He didn't notice it, so she gave up. According to my father, Sasha told him she loved my kids equally, but my daughter was special, because she always imagined herself as a girl mom. That's also the reason why she became such a suffocating presence when my daughter was a baby. When my husband and I started setting boundaries, Sasha realized she was overstepping and agreed to abide by them. To her credit, I think she did a mostly okay job back then, but the favoritism was still obvious enough that my son noticed it. The trip we took was a turning point because Sasha's dream of having a daughter included taking her to Disney World and having her do all the things she liked to do there when she was young. She told my father that having my daughter there was so exciting that she forgot everything I'd said about not overstepping. Sasha wanted a mother-daughter trip, and tried to use my child for it. Sasha said she regretted her actions during the Disney trip, but only because she lost access to my children due to them. And seeing me at the party, all pregnant and pretty, my father's words, not sure she actually said that, was what drove her over the edge. I remember reading some comments theorizing that this was what was going on, but I still didn't really expect this. My father said he was telling me all this because his wife wasn't doing well, and he'd understand if I wanted to keep my kids away from her. Didn't expect that, either. I don't know what the future of their relationship will be, and I don't think my father does either. All I know is that if Sasha still wants to have kids, it almost definitely will not be with my father. Before all this, I was pondering about my 3rd child's future in relation to Sasha. Now, I sincerely don't want her to be a part of my baby's life. This isn't a final decision, but I've been speaking to my husband about it, and he agrees with me. I don't think she's a bad person. I got some baby stealer comments on my previous update, but I don't think that's what's happening here, either. But if the Disney trip proved anything to me, it's that Sasha is willing to be extremely selfish and disrespectful to get what she wants, even when my kids are involved. A couple months ago, my husband and I had a conversation with our son about the subject. He told us he dislikes Sasha for 2 reasons. She favors his sister and she doesn't listen to them. Honestly, that's all I need to know. Looking back at my own childhood, I feel like I was never allowed to have boundaries. I was always expected to put my schedules and preferences aside for others. It's important to me that my children don't go through that. If they don't want to see Sasha, they don't have to. I think that's all I want to say here. I'm doing well. I actually got great news from work recently. My kids are thriving, and I'm excited to meet my 3rd baby. Now on to second story. Boyfriend cornered me into sharing my mental health struggles to be invited to his friend's game night. Now I refuse to visit them again. My boyfriend Steven, 31 male, and I, 29F, have been dating for about a year. Steven and his sister Rowan, 28F, are friends with a couple Lily 34F and Jared 36M who they play D&D and board games with. Since dating Steven, I've met them a few times and joined in their dinners. Recently, they planned a game night and only invited Steven and Rowan. I work irregular hours, nights, schedule changes every couple of weeks, and only have one weekend day off a week, which is typically when Steven and I get to spend time together, and they scheduled for that night. It was fairly last minute. I felt hurt and confused about not being invited because, in my experience, partners are usually included in social events, and I've always done the same for others. Also, I'm an avid gamer, TTRPGs, board games, etc., and Steven and Rowan were thinking of taking my copy of a brand new game I'd bought recently to play with. But I don't know for sure that Lily and her husband knew it was my game. I told Steven how I felt, explaining that I was stressed from work, emergency response type role, and it was a rough week, and didn't want to spend the night alone. He spoke with Lily, who said they only wanted the 2 siblings because it was a 4-person game. Steven then put me on the phone with Lily, and pushed me to tell her about my mental health struggle and why I wanted to come even if I just watch, so I did, even though I'm an extremely private person and never allow vulnerability outside of close relationships. She said she sympathized but still refused and suggested I find other coping mechanisms, like using a weighted blanket, instead of relying on Steven for support. I ended the call feeling vulnerable and very upset, and had a meltdown, ADHD emotional overload, not a tantrum. I did not yell or demand anything. Afterward, I told Steven I didn't want to visit Lily and her husband again as I am obviously not welcome, but I encouraged him, without any passive aggressiveness, to go and enjoy himself. I didn't want to appear clingy and keep him from his friends, even though I was struggling emotionally. With their explanations about wanting 4 people, and that I'd be bored, I'm questioning whether I overreacted. I see them thinking he should have activities without me, and not knowing that he does. I have never asked him to cancel any plans for me before. This was not a common occurrence. I've been spiraling with all sorts of thoughts as to why they didn't want me, worried that they hate me, or that they don't accept me as his GF. I also wonder if my stress and ADHD rejection sensitivity influenced my reaction. Ada for asking to come even though I wasn't invited and then reacting so strongly to a refusal that I will not see them again? Answers to a few concerns and a bit more backstory. 1. Steven lives with his sister, Rowan, and they see each other all day because he WFH and she only works PT, so I wasn't trying to take sibling time away. 2. It was a board game night, not D&D. It wasn't something they do all the time, just a one-off. And they were gonna play a board game I had recently bought with Rowan and Steven. Actually, they were gonna take my copy lol, and hadn't had a chance to play, so I at least wanted to watch to learn the rules and stuff. It is only 4 players. 3. I don't have my own separate friend group as I moved to this city for work, and the first few people I met were incredibly toxic and it's been hard to make new friends with my job and weird hours. I also work with mostly men, so it's hard to just make friends and not have it misconstrued. I met Steven coincidentally at a local event where I was supposed to meet some coworkers, but then walked away from the group Becca, use of their wives/GFS giving me death glares. 4. I didn't ask to go at first, I just wondered why I hadn't been invited and that I'd rather spend the time with him. Steven is a bit of a people pleaser, but especially with his sister, and she was on Lily's side that no, I don't need to be invited. This isn't the only event where she's involved that I've been excluded from. So, anyway, he thought he could talk them into inviting me and then handed me the phone during that call. I don't think he realized the terrible position he put us both in. I was mortified because I'm the kind of person who will never push my company where it is not wanted and will back away at the slightest hint of that from anyone. My family is all like that, with my grandma making lifelong oaths to never set foot into houses where she ever felt unwanted and sticking to that till her dying breath. So, I tried for Steven's sake, thinking he knows his friends better, and maybe this is a misunderstanding. 5. Steven's previous serious GF was a piece of work and an all-around awful person to be around, and I do think I've gotten a lot of the backlash for that. I didn't understand why I was getting some weird energy in all my intro meetings with his circle until some of his friends told me they were nervous about meeting me for the first time, but are so glad I'm a decent person and not like her. Maybe Lily and her hubby have not accepted that yet? She even said one day she thinks I'll leave him after chewing him up because I'm out of his league, and am probably just playing with him. Update 1. Steven realized the toll it had on me, apologized, and said he would stay with me, but I told him to go. I assured him that I would deal with my feelings on my own, and I especially didn't want his sister to think anything bad about me since they are very close. I wanted to put the whole thing behind me, having come to the conclusion that I won't be friends with Lily and her spouse, but I don't want to ruin his friendship. Then he told me today that they set up the game but then just got food and chatted and hung out all night, so I got a bit pissed off, but he was angry too, so I think he sees the situation better now as well. He says Lily was weird to act this way because he's never seen her be this cold or exclusive before and always talks about inclusivity and being welcoming, and she definitely has dealt with serious mental health issues before that they've helped her through and accommodated. But after reading everyone's comments, I do see her side of it. I can see how it might come across as me using my struggle to strong arm and manipulate my way into an event at their house, but I only shared because of Steven's belief that she would be caring and understanding and helpful. I still think she was mean to exclude me like that, especially after the events of the night, but I see how it was a very shitty experience for her, too. Anyway, BF and I are going to work on our communication. I told him how the issue escalated because we didn't work it out between us, and that we should never have actively involved her. He understood. He's 31, but he's been living alone and having mostly short-term relationships, so he hasn't had a chance to learn to navigate these things. And his last serious GF was all of the red flags. Yes. He might be neurodivergent too.